Hi, my name is Joe Massaro. I'm the owner of Right Over Water on Petra Island in Mayorpac, New York. This is coming to you from U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Archivist Natalie Morath is the keeper of Eero Saarinen's GM Technical Center history, bringing the amazing campus to life for yet another generation of fans. She's one of our guests today, along with Linda Brettler. Linda renovated Raphael Soriano's 1964 Grossman House. Then we'll meet Marcos Santa Anna, who transformed the Wagoya House in Los Angeles. Later, our musical guest is the amazing guitarist John Pizzarelli, with a sound that's both timeless and new. And now, your host, the timeless Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. There are roughly 170,000 words in English language. Shakespeare invented about 1,700 of them, but no one in history has gotten more mileage out of a single five-letter word than one man has gotten from T-R-U-M-P. It's on towers, hotels, casinos, golf courses, steaks, a university, a board game, bottled water, a beloved performing arts center named for a beloved president, and briefly, a bicycle race. In 1983, Trump Tower rose on Fifth Avenue, 58 stories of dark glass and brass, with Trump displayed with the subtlety of a car alarm in letters you could read from New Jersey. What followed was one of the great naming sprees: Trump Plaza, Trump Palace, Trump Park Avenue, Trump World Tower, Trump International Hotel and Tower. He was one of the first living moguls to realize that you don't actually have to build the building to put your name on it. Trump discovered that his name was itself the product. Developers would pay simply to affix those 5 brass letters. Trump Towers in Istanbul was a licensing deal. So was Trump Tower in Mumbai. At various points, there were buildings in the Philippines, Uruguay, Panama, South Korea, India, and for a while, Toronto. Of course, names on buildings are not new. The Chrysler Building says Chrysler, the Woolworth Building says Woolworth. But those men built one namesake building and called it a day. They did not proceed to name a line of neckties, a modeling agency, and a fragrance. Walter Chrysler never put his name on a steak. Frank Woolworth never launched vodka. But now Trump is president again, and he's on a roll, renaming the Kennedy Center and the Institute of Peace. He's trying to do it also with Dulles Airport and Penn Station. Somewhere, there's a warehouse full of giant letters waiting to be bolted on at a moment's notice. There's a difference, though, between having a building named after you and treating the entire built environment as a monogram opportunity. But his naming obsession ain't going to stop soon. No building is safe. When he renames the Washington Monument, perhaps, it will say Trump in giant lighted vertical letters, visible from space, and the lobby bar will serve $28 cocktails. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by the Brent R. Harris Charitable Trust, restorer of Richard Neutra's Kaufman Desert House in Palm Springs, and 6 other houses in California. By the E. Fay Jones Conservancy, preserving the legacy of modernist architecture in Northwest Arkansas. efayjonesconservancy.org. And by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Before Silicon Valley and Research Triangle Park had corporate campuses, there was the General Motors Technical Center in Warren, Michigan. Eero Saarinen's bold mid-century experiment that reshaped how American corporations imagined space, design, and their public identity. Completed in 1956, the GM Tech Center was conceived as a total work of art, uniting Saarinen with figures like Alexander Calder, Harry Bertoia, Florence Knoll, and Alexander Girard. It earned the nickname the American Versailles. Natalie Morath is the archivist and curator of the traveling exhibition, also called An American Versailles. One of the stops on that tour was last year, courtesy of our pals at the New Canaan Museum and Historical Society. It was the first time these materials have traveled outside Detroit, a rare inside look at how art, architecture, and industry converged at a pivotal moment in design history. Here's George's conversation with Natalie Morath.
Natalie, in 1956, President Dwight Eisenhower was there for the opening of the GM Technical Center, but this project began much earlier, I understand, in 1949. And my first question is, how did Saarinen get picked for this project?
Well, it really started earlier than 1949. It was a long process, really, just to begin the Tech Center project. In the early 1940s, the leadership at General Motors was talking about moving to a new facility that would be very function-oriented, so very focused on meeting their current needs for product design and development. So that included engineering, research, manufacturing, and design. All of those activities would be together in one location, but have their own facilities that were designed specifically to accommodate the activities going on in those buildings. So they asked Harley Earl, who was the vice president of design, to make a recommendation for an architect. And he leaned on his team. And after doing kind of a survey of notable architects at the time, they put forward Raphael Soriano, Eero's father. So he was the original architect for the Tech Center. He produced drawings. Eero was working in his architecture firm at the time, so they worked together on the project. And then World War II really disrupted the entire process. The whole thing was put on pause. GM manufacturing switched over to war material, essentially. And then when they came back to the project in 1949, Raphael passed away. The firm was taken over by Eero, and they stuck with the original firm choice. So they kept Eero on since he had already been kind of involved in the project in the earlier phase. So for kind of the sake of continuity.
And there was really nothing else quite like this at the time.
No, absolutely not.
Certainly not in scale.
No, definitely not. The best comparison would maybe be a large college campus, but there's no college campus that's quite this size. And even then, you would have maybe one or two buildings or groups of buildings kind of added on over time, so it would grow more organically. This was very unique in that you had one architect building an enormous industrial campus all at one time with one very singular vision for the entire project, every single building having a unified look and feel. And that's why the media coined the term for American Versailles. So the Palace of Versailles in France would be maybe, in some people's mind, the best comparison in terms of the scope and scale of the project as a design undertaking.
And it was designed with a capital D, or maybe in all caps, because you had people like Harry Bartoya involved, Alexander Girard, Florence Knoll, the whole A-team of designers of that era.
Absolutely, yeah. Raphael and Eero Saarinen had the Cranbrook connection, and they were not afraid to use it. And it was early enough in many of those people's careers that I think they were quite excited to have a project like that to work on. It was Harry Bartoya's first time having a commission for a building for an architecture project. And after the Tech Center, he went on to do so many more of those, but we have his very first one. And yeah, there are beautiful examples now all over campus of work by all of these incredible, quite notable people. And there were also quite a few wonderful architects who worked on the staff at Eero Saarinen's firm who would go on to have pretty notable careers themselves.
Who were some of those people?
John Dinklew, Kevin Roche, who officially took over the firm after Eero Saarinen passed away.
Yes.
He died sort of young, as you probably know. Warren Plattner was another one. Warren Plattner.
Oh, sure. Warren Plattner.
Those would be kind of the big three who really worked on the Tech Center project quite a bit.
This campus really was designed to be not only, aesthetically pleasing, but it had so many different functions that were tied together.
Yes.
So when it debuted in 1956, it really took the whole world by storm.
Yeah, it did. The media coverage is pretty incredible. I mean, it was, you'd have sort of the expected coverage of it where, all the local newspapers covering the dedication events and all of that. And then you would have very technical journals, engineering journals covering the machinery and the new technology and what GM was going to be experimenting with. You had architecture and design publications covering the landscaping and the architecture and the sort of aesthetic choices. And you even had like women's interest magazines writing about how you could take ideas from the Tech Center architecture and incorporate them into your own home, into your own living room. And there were several really beautiful fashion editorial shoots where garments were kind of paired with architectural features and with vehicles. And that was in Vogue. And then I believe there was another one, maybe in like Ladies' Home Companion or a publication like that. So it's just absolutely every type of media was interested in covering the campus in some capacity. Everyone found their sort of way into the story.
It's so cool to see how, you go on the campus and there were things like the famous fountain, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Well, really two fountains. When you drive in through the main gate, you approach this wall of water that just shoots straight up, coming up from the man-made lake right in the center there. And I think that is a bit of a design homage to one of Eliel's early plans for the campus. He actually wanted a kind of centralized administration type building to be over the water, almost to appear like it was floating in the lake. And I imagine that was eliminated for so many practical reasons.
Yes.
But the wall of water from the fountain still gives you that sort of visual cue. And then over in front of the research administration building, you have Alexander Calder's water ballet fountain. So you mentioned all of the kind of heavy hitters of the time who worked on the Tech Center. Alexander Calder was another one of those. And he was commissioned to do some kind of kinetic sculpture was what Saarinen asked for. And what he got was a fountain with a 5-minute long choreography of different movements of water that would mimic dancers and kind of a ballet.
Like people know at the Bellagio in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean,
But this came much earlier.
Yes, it came earlier. It's a bit smaller in scale, but yes, similar.
Yeah, okay. Now, in 1953, while the construction was going on, there was a big change in Saarinen's life. A reporter named Eileen came to town for an interview.
He sure did.
And I understand it's like she came in the morning at 9 o'clock, and by 5 o'clock they were in a dark room at Cranbrook doing what she termed turning the corner together.
Yes, yeah, that's how they describe it in their correspondence. They turned a corner in their relationship. Yeah, so Eileen Saarinen, Eileen Lusheim, before she became Eileen Saarinen, was a really major art and architecture critic. She had a really interesting career, and she came to Detroit to see the Tech Center in progress and to write about Eero Saarinen's work. She was already a huge fan of his work. And they met, they walked around the campus together. She interviewed him, and yes, they fell in love. And, the rest is history. And she was his biggest cheerleader for sure. She was very adept at sort of helping him brand himself and build his career and his reputation as an architect. She's often kind of cited as sort of like the woman behind the man, really. She was very instrumental in his career in that way, sort of his PR machine. But she also really used her art and architecture background in influencing the art program, the art commissions at the Tech Center. I mean, she helped select the Antoine Pevsner sculpture that's in front of the design building. She had a relationship with Alexander Calder already. She had done interviews with him. So it may have been that her kind of connections in the art world helped Saarinen bring some of those other people into the project as well.
She was incredibly talented, and after Saarinen died, she was a TV figure for a number of years.
Yeah.
And died really, quite young for that time.
Yeah, she was just incredibly smart and really multifaceted, multi-talented. I think it would have been so interesting to see how the trajectory that would have followed had they lived longer lives, It's really unfortunate that they both passed kind of young, because it seems like there is so much potential.
Between 1956 and when Eero Saarinen died, she was just brilliant at getting the press to pay attention to his completed commissions, his new projects, everything. I believe, if this is right, he was on the cover of Time during that period.
Yep.
Back when Time magazine was featuring architects, which they don't do anymore.
Right.
There were like 6 or 7 covers of architects on Time magazine, which was, it's crazy to think about today. That would never happen.
No, it was a very different time in American architecture, I think. I mean, you still have a few very famous architects today, but I think people know their names much more than they would know their faces.
Yeah.
If you were to put, Norman Foster on the cover of a magazine, I don't think the average American looking at, magazines at the newsstand would recognize him, although no one buys magazines at the newsstand anymore. Just the way we consume.
Yeah, that's so mid-century, Natalie.
But at that time, it was all about these architects who were celebrities, basically. I mean, they were big and megalomaniacs, maybe. I mean, you had Frank Lloyd Wright as kind of the original one, and then there was sort of a passing of the torch to like maybe a Philip Johnson type who was so good, I think, at bouncing back from scandal, shall we say, and managing his reputation throughout his career. So, yeah, they almost became like brand names as much as they were designers.
Like Beyonce, for instance, today.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
I know you're a big Beyonce fan. That's why I mentioned that.
Yes, yes. Or almost like other designers at the time, like Charles and Ray Eames or Florence Knoll. Their names became so powerful and associated with all this work that they had done.
Now, everything has ups and downs. So when did the campus go into decline and things started to break or not get fixed or under-maintained as facilities do?
The funny thing is, I think since we dedicated the campus in 1956, construction projects or renovation projects have never really stopped. When we dedicated the campus, we were already building beyond the original Saarinen campus. We had already outgrown our space because the project itself took so long.
Yeah.
And because it's so, functionally based on the process of car design, I mean, the way we design cars, the way we make cars, the way we drive, that changes so much. We didn't know we were going to need a wind tunnel or a battery lab. So these are all things that had to be added on. So really, in terms of maintenance, I mean, the campus has to constantly be maintained. We're like a small town. We have 25,000 residents working on campus. Most days it's not completely full because people work remotely, or some people might be, going downtown or out at Milford for the day or what have you. But that's sort of the number of people who are assigned to work at the tech center. We have roads, we have sidewalks, we have tunnels, we have our own little medical facility if there's some kind of emergency of that nature, So we're a small town, and it really has to be maintained because of that. Really, the biggest problem on campus, I would say, are the geese, the Canadian geese.
They're awful.
They're awful. They really enjoy those big open spaces designed by Thomas Church, and they love nesting there. And of course, we have this beautiful lake in the center. So they love the campus and really have made it their home. And then they nest in the springtime and get very aggressive. And it's just a constant battle.
They are terrible.
To clean up after them.
The reason I asked the question is because I know, for instance, that the lake and the fountains fell to pieces after a while, had to be restored.
Yeah, the Calder Fountain in particular just went through a major rebuilding process. And we did all of that work internally using our design fabrication shop. So these are the kind of folks who normally would spend their day building a concept car. And instead, they were asked to basically take apart the fountain, look at all these pieces and rebuild it. And as they rebuilt it, look for opportunities to improve upon it and potentially make it better, last longer, use better materials for the future. Because really what Calder designed and what constitutes the artwork is the water moving above the surface. All of the mechanics and the plumbing below ground, that's not really so important. So we were able to, replace all the piping, replace all the electrics in the pump station. It was very old. I got to go down there after it was drained, before everything was renovated, and it was pretty gnarly looking. It kind of looked like when cameras went down and like deep sea diving for the Titanic. It had that sort of like rusty quality to it because it was an underwater mechanical system. And at the moment, our other fountain is getting a little bit of facelift as well. It didn't need nearly as much repair work, but now the Calder Fountain can be controlled electronically. So there are a few people on campus, not myself, but a few people who can actually turn on the Calder Fountain with their cell phones and control it that way.
Yes. Nice.
So the main wall of water fountain is going to have that feature as well, now that it's getting repaired.
Now, in one of my favorite places to get news, Popular Science reported in 2024 that the campus was getting a $2 billion addition and renovation. So who are the architects behind all of that?
So I believe that article is probably referring to the design building part in particular getting an addition.
Design West, I think they called it.
Yes, Design West. Yeah, we still call it that. The architect for that addition to the building was Smith Group.
Okay.
I can't imagine a more daunting task than trying to add on to an Eero Saarinen building, but they were willing to step up to the challenge. So they added essentially a new studio building with a very small lobby out front. We still use the Saarinen building, as we call it now, as our main entrance. That's where visitors would go in. But the motivation behind the new studio building was to make some big improvements to the studio spaces for the designers and sculptors working in there based on, 50 plus years of occupancy, learning from that and knowing sort of what we needed now. For example, a more state-of-the-art lighting system. The Saarinen building has a beautiful lighting system that in 1956 was the best that you could get. It created a really shadowless, even lighting over the studio space, which is great for sculpting and looking at surfaces. But now there are more sophisticated options available, obviously. So that was a huge upgrade. We also had different groups from design spread over campus a little bit. We couldn't all fit into one building. So now we are all able to be in one building together. It is a huge building and it's a long walk, from one person's office to another. But now everybody is able to be in the design building together.
Now, can the public visit the GM Center or their open house days during the year? How does that work?
The GM Tech Center is not open to the public. They used to, back when it first opened in 1956, do open house style events, but they haven't had anything to that effect as long as I have worked there.
Okay.
And as far as I know, there are no plans to do that. I mean, part of the problem is that it is, again, 25,000 people every day trying to do their jobs and get their work done. So it's very hard to accommodate outside visitors who just want to see the architecture, let's say. Every once in a while, the design archive staff, we will get permission to do maybe a special tour for visitors, but there's a complicated approval process for that. And it truly goes up quite high in the leadership chain to get permission to do that for someone. So
it's the papal blessing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You have to have a good reason to come through and see it. Yes. Even within GM, I was able to give a little tour of some architectural features last week for other GM employees who don't work in the Saarinen campus. They work in a newer building. So They were thrilled. They had never seen a design studio before, and it was a rare treat for them, and they work for General Motors. So that gives you an idea of the level of security and confidentiality, because we are working on cars that are not going to be seen by the public for 10 years.
Right. Where they'll all be using peanut butter as fuel or something exotic like that.
I can't confirm that.
You heard it here first, folks. Jif is going to be your fuel source for transportation in 2035. Natalie, the American Versailles exhibition, I have seen it myself. It's so well done.
Oh, thank you.
And even if you can't visit it, it does tell a lot of the story of the campus and putting it together. Thank you so much for talking with me.
You're very welcome.
George is speaking with Natalie Morath of the GM Technical Center. Linda Brettler is the steward of the 1964 all-aluminum Grossman House by Raphael Soriano. The only surviving example of Soriano's aluminum houses, the landmark in Studio City, California, was a time capsule and a challenge to buy, with failing systems, frozen sliding glass doors, and decades of wear. Linda sought to honor Soriano's original vision, restoring the 28 sliding glass doors, floating cabinetry, terrazzo floors, and the iconic yellow Formica kitchen. Here's George with Linda Brettler.
Linda, before we talk about architecture, let's talk about biochemistry. You were a biochemistry major at Harvard, which is not the easiest subject to take on. How did that transition to architecture?
Well, I came from a family that was very science related. Like my dad was an engineer, my mom was a chemist. There was no artistic personalities per se in my family. So that was sort of just the mode that I grew up in. But I was always the kind of strange artsy kid. Like I would make all the greeting cards for everyone and birthday cards, and I was always making things. And my dad had a nice workshop. So I was always making like wood things and welding and crocheting. And I was very into anything tactile that I could make and painting a lot. So at Harvard, I was in biochemistry, but I kind of minored in. I did a lot of Japanese culture. I was very fascinated with that. So studied calligraphic painting and took some film classes and that sort of thing. But it was really at Harvard, there's a Le Corbusier building.
Uh-huh.
And I would walk by there all the time and I go, I knew no architect. I didn't even know the field of architecture existed. But I would walk by that building and just be entranced with it and decided I had to take a class just so I could be in that building. And that class was like an intro design my senior year. And I felt like I was jumping in some deep lake, like, because everything else seemed very known to me. English and science and all that was attainable, but the design world was just endless. And so I had a late start in it, but that's how I discovered architecture, by taking a design class there. And then I took a year off after college to just take drafting classes at the local community college. And I worked for an interior designer for a year and then applied to architecture school. So I came into architecture school like completely unprepared, but it was a sink or swim situation. But it all worked out.
Right. It really did all work out. And before the house we're going to talk about, the Soriano house, you lived in a very sort of traditional Hollywood mansion type facility, right?
Yes. I always felt as an architect that, and I love historic houses of all kinds, just because the level of detail is so thought out, that to me, style was always kind of like the clothing a person wears. Like, the building has to have great flow and light and proportion and all these things. And whether it's Spanish Mediterranean or a modernist house, it has to have those qualities. So in my practice, I do everything and I love doing everything. And I know that's not probably a good way to make your name as an architect, but I love working in every different style, especially in LA where there's such a rich variety of historic houses. And, I can work on a mansion in Hancock Park, and then I can do a modernist one in Crestwood Hills. I love the variety of that. And it's all about design and being true to the spirit of the house. And that's what really gets me excited. So I'm kind of more like those old school architects. I was in Bucharest recently, and there's this amazing unknown architect who did Gothic and Bauhaus and everything in between. And that's kind of my ideal.
The Soriano house, of course, is a modernist house from 1964. But you were living in this other house for a long time. Did any of your former association with the Mad Men series kind of prepare your way to get to where you are now?
Well, my old house was like a Hollywood, just like Julia Morgan. Like, I was inspired by her castle, by all the excesses of that kind of Hollywood Spanish glamour. I put my heart and soul in that and designed tile, wrought iron, everything in that house. And I was like, I'm never leaving this house. But at a certain point, when your kids grow up and you're in a giant mansion, it doesn't really make sense to keep that going. It was like on an acre of land. I mean, it was really a special place. And I did think I was never going to leave. So when I started looking for a new place, I knew I'm not going to compete with that house. I'm never going to find a house like this that I'm going to want to put, that same kind of detail and effort into. And I was living differently. I was more on my own, had kids in and out. And I was like, I want something entirely different. So I wanted something that was much more communal, open, connection with nature, and smaller, much more manageable. So I wasn't looking for a particular style. And this house, when I saw, I visited this house with an architect friend and had no intention of even putting a bid on it. But when I first saw it, it was just like love at first sight sort of thing.
Well, architect Raphael Soriano didn't do a huge number of houses, and this is certainly one of the most preserved now, particularly with your participation in it. You bought it in 2021, and what shape was it in when you got it?
Okay, the original owners had it till they died, so for 50 years.
The Grossmans.
Yeah, the Grossman. Soriano built it for, Albert Grossman was an aluminum manufacturer. He's credited with, I don't know if he invented the aluminum sliding door, but he made a lot of them. And the house was just like completely aluminum sliding doors. But he did a lot of facade work and all that kind of stuff. So they lived here till they died. In the interim, for about 4 or 5 years, this second owner had it. And I like to say that, they weren't American. So they didn't have the same expectations of like the new glossy house where everything has to work. The great thing was they didn't do anything to it. So it was in its pristine state.
Yeah.
And that was the problem as well, because they were sort of living in this fossil where like none of the appliances worked, where the doors weren't opening. And I remember asking the wife, like, because I saw all the work it needed, how is it living here? And she's like, it's really challenging because they lived here with their daughter and they weren't equipped to fix anything. There was nothing that was easily fixable. It's not that kind of house. So they just sort of lived with it as is, which was a blessing for me because they didn't do anything terrible to it. Not only was the house pristine, I mean, there were filing cabinets full of Albert Grossman's aluminum samples and his correspondence. And
Wow.
the garage storage had sheets of micarta and cork. So like when I had to restore the cork, I saw what the original cork looked like because it was in a nice dark place. And they had a lot of the original furniture from Grossman. So I got to inherit this sort of treasure trove, knowing that it was going to be a lot of work. Nothing had been done for 50, whatever, 60, some years.
Well, you certainly had a lot of interesting things that you found. Like there was a Pyrex hot plate still there, built in, a wall-mounted radio, Eames bar stools. I mean, these are things that you pay a lot of money to buy somewhere else and bring in, but you already had them.
Yeah, I mean, it had all the Richard Schultz original, which is now like in MoMA, outdoor furniture. Yeah, the dining set was original. There were these amazing cork and these giant brass shaded floor lamps. Yeah, there was a lot of wonderful stuff. And actually the remodels, what I would say like the insensitive remodels that were done by the original owner, not by the intermediary.
Yeah.
So like the things like closing in the courtyard and adding these skylights and weird like resin bathtubs on top of the original terrazzo one. And the kitchen, when I first saw the kitchen and I showed it to people, that was another thing where they're like, oh, you're going to put in, you're going to take out these laminate countertops and put in, some solid surface stone. And I was like, these laminate countertops are 64 years old and they're still great.
Formica, right?
Yeah, it was actually micarta, which was an early form of formica.
Okay.
And where I had to do new cabinetry, I used formica, but the micarta holds up better even than formica. And, weird kind of asymmetric sinks and the Pyrex hot plate, intercom, all that stuff. I was like, keep it. It was great.
So what advice do you have for people who are wanting to take on a mid-century renovation?
If it's a house like this, call it out. Because it's not anything you can take on your own. Like this house, which was so much fun for me, there was no standard typical solution for anything. I mean, it's slab on grade house with no walls, no attic space, no ceiling plenum. So you had to figure out like, how am I going to bring new, low voltage in and electrical so that I can put some shades in this place because it's a hot house otherwise. And you run things hidden in cabinetry, or when we redid the roof, we hid them in the roof. And since it's an historic monument, you can't put any holes in the micarta. So how do you mount like paintings and things like that? So I figured out like overhead track systems. So it was fun as an architect because there was no standard solution. But I don't think any layperson could take that on. You really need
specialized help.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. But it was a dream for me. Very frustrating at sometimes. Also, I couldn't find people to make this stuff anymore. Like no one fabricates aluminum, three-dimensional aluminum gates or frames, or just finding a qualified person for terrazzo was hard in Los Angeles.
Yes, I bet that is hard.
Yeah.
So where did you end up finding these specialists to work on your house? How'd you find them?
More just trial and error. The terrazzo guy, I have to say, I was not pleased with and would never recommend that person again. For the aluminum, I had to weld steel gates on site because we used the existing aluminum panels and fit them in.
Okay.
Because I had to find just a good steel guy, and that was the best I could do. And I did find an aluminum person who could do furniture pieces for me. So like I restored the courtyard to an exterior space, put in that fire pit and add these sort of cantilever benches. And those I found an aluminum fabricator to actually make the benches. He's since gone out of business. So, and the tile, all the tile that I used where I added, it was all old stock or ones that had been discontinued. So it was really a treasure hunt, one of the light fixtures I found in Denmark, one of the hinges. I went to 7 different antique hardware stores, and I ended up having to find that online somewhere. You're spending a lot of hours searching for things or trying to figure it out.
Well, thank you so much for doing it. I mean, I'm so glad that it didn't get torn down and turn into something awful.
Yeah, and it's really a wonderful house. The quality of living here is sort of unlike anything I've been in. And the fact that it is all aluminum, I had a great contractor too who was willing to experiment with me. And he's like, Linda, you bought a really expensive Treller. Which is essentially what the house feels like. I mean, it's so light, and with the entire structure being these 3-inch aluminum columns, and it has this very ethereal, like sort of sundial quality of just like you are in nature.
Soriano really had an interesting career arc. He was very well known in the early part of the career, and then later on, he kind of just fell out. He died almost penniless.
Yeah.
And people that knew him said he was a really cranky old man there towards the end. What happened in the second half of his life? Do you know much about his history?
Well, all I know from reading, and I have a great transcript that one of the UC schools did, where they interviewed him later in life that the owners gave me. Soriano would sort of famously fall out with all of his clients. And of course, Grossman, he held Soriano in high regard, but I don't think the reverse was true. So the space I'm in now is an addition that was done 5 years later by Grossman. And it's a wonderful space. This is actually a steel addition to the rest of the aluminum house. But when I read about Soriano's life, I mean, fascinating. He was born in Rhodes, Greece, and then he lived like very cheaply in downtown LA and hung out with all the musicians of the LA Philharmonic. After the article came out in the LA Times, Neutra's son and grandson contacted me because Soriano also worked for Neutra.
Yeah.
And was a big fan of it, and actually went back to and worked for him for free. But they sent me photographs of Soriano with them as kids. Like, he was a real beloved part of their family. But I think he was very rigid, or just like personality-wise was fairly uncompromising. And so for that reason fell out with his clients.
And it's really interesting that he died in 1988, but he died broke and had no gravesite, and he didn't get one until 2017, when fans got together and got him a very simple grave marker. We have a photo of that in our Soriano.
Where is he buried?
That is a good question. I have the picture of the stone, but not the location.
Yeah.
We'll have to look that up.
And that's why I felt like in communion with him, because, he did Julia Schulman's house.
Yes.
And what I heard is that Julia Schulman originally wanted all of his different favorite architects to do different rooms. And Soriano would do one. And Soriano was like, no, if I'm doing it, I'm doing your whole house.
Yeah.
And what Schulman said was, when you have Neutra doing your house, you have a Neutra house, whatever, all those architects, you have their version of the house. But when you have Soriano do it, you have your house.
Yeah.
And that just rang so true to me, because that's completely how I feel about when you do residential architecture. It shouldn't be your vanity project. You're designing something where a client is going to live. And that's what's very interesting about this house. It's completely a collaboration. Like, you feel it. I think that's why this house is so different than other Soriano houses, is that it's Soriano and it's very much Albert Grossman. You can feel both of their presences very strongly in the house.
You can read about Soriano at usmodernist.org/Soriano, and more about Linda Brettler at lindabrettler.com. That's LINDABRETTLER.com. Thanks for talking with me, Linda.
Thank you. This was a pleasure.
That was George's conversation with Linda Brettler. Marcos Santa Anna grew up in the rural community of Woodstock, New York, in a family of artists and craftsmen. Founder of the award-winning Los Angeles-based Alloy, Marcos is known for renovations like the Wagoya House and the Lake Pitch House. Across these projects, he updates mechanical systems, reworks layouts, integrates landscaping, and carefully combines modern materials with original structures to enhance both function and design.
Marcos, for our listeners who are a little younger, let's say like under 60, why don't you tell them about Woodstock, New York, and how I got famous and what it was like to grow up there.
Yeah, it was kind of the epicenter of music and experimentation. It's actually where I grew up, just outside that area. And so I was always influenced by creativity and experimentation, as I mentioned. There's a lot of folks who live in the area, but also are from New York City, just a little drive away. So it was always exciting to be amongst that type of level of curiosity.
And this was the famous concert site in the 60s, right?
Yeah, actually, the original was about 45 minutes south because the town of Woodstock was so small, it couldn't accommodate that scale. But the town itself, Woodstock, kind of inhabits the energy of the music festival.
And this was like the music festival of its time. I mean, it's not like today where almost every major city has some kind of music festival. This was big and huge and had all the major acts of the day. You know, Jimi Hendrix and many others. Really incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was amazing. And too bad I wasn't alive to experience it the first round. But there were two others. One was in Saugerties, which is a little bit further north of town. And then there's one out west in western New York.
Okay.
But yeah, trying to reinvigorate that original experience of Woodstock.
And I love the way that you called this an experimental kind of concert, because you went on to study experimental architecture at Buffalo, and you've been wandering the world. You spent time in Denmark looking at architecture. So what's the best of this experimentation that we should be doing more of in building our houses?
I spent a couple months, almost a year, in Europe, both in Barcelona, Spain, and in Aarhus, Denmark. Aarhus is the second largest city next to Copenhagen. And yeah, what I learned is experimenting in form, in materiality, but also there's also restraint that I learned as well. Coming from New York, where the schooling was more about be as free as possible, experiment, take a step outside of even the general thoughts that you initially have to design a building or a house. But, studying in Europe, I learned that there's also a level of restraint that's important to implement. But in Spain and in Denmark, they kind of have a different understanding of modernism and how to approach it. So I just think in general, learning from different cultures really gives you a sense of what's appropriate for the specific site and allows you to really get creative, but also in an appropriate manner.
So how did the Europeans teach restraint? How does that apply to what we do here?
Specifically Denmark, there's a lot of contemporary or modernist buildings in Denmark, but oftentimes they're a little bit more rational. So as compared to some of the American modern architecture. As an architect, you always approach every project. You learn from the client, you learn from the site. But when I say restraint, it's more about how many moves can you make with the structure so there's a logical harmony. A lot of the buildings that were built in the 90s and the 2000s, they kind of went, in my opinion, a little bit over the edge. If you take too many steps or implement too many architectural moves, oftentimes you can get people confused. And so the approach that I learned through studying architecture in Europe was that almost less is more, where if you make clear logical moves architecturally, in essence, it actually will create a more holistic, simplified understanding of the space. And that's a lot of words to say. When you enter your home or enter a building, you want it to be simple, clean, and clear.
So having Frank Gehry design your house is probably not a good example of that.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, he was good. He obviously impacted the world positively, but a lot of his buildings, when you experience them, they don't necessarily give you a sense of peace or calm. Okay. It's more about, here I am, let's try to experiment with form.
Fair enough. Now, one of your notable projects is called the Wagoya House.
That's right.
Where is that, and how did you get involved in it?
That's in an area of LA just north of the airport. Wagoya is actually the Japanese term for post and beam. It was an originally 1940s house that our client approached us, wanted to expand and remodel. And so we implemented a lot of feng shui and other mid-century modern approaches to that remodel.
I didn't know feng shui was a mid-century modern thing.
So, well, it's not necessarily mid-century modern, but the client, she being from the Philippines, and had an Asian influence. We have a lot of clients that request the Asian influence. The Wagoya House, the front facade was really key for the project. And we tried to implement the requests that our client had, but also keeping in line with the mid-century modern aesthetic, which is derived from very minimalist, clean, slender columns and slender roofs. And so in Southern California, meeting the energy code and complying with our clients' aesthetics can be a challenge at times. And so the Wagoya House was one of those approaches that we thought turned out pretty well.
So what awards did it win?
Yeah, we won a Golden Nugget Award for a remodel to a home.
Where does the Golden Nugget Award come from? Is that like Baskin-Robbins or someplace else?
Pretty close, yeah. That's what it sounds like, right? Yeah, exactly. It's actually, it's an award that's been around for a while. Golden Nugget referencing the gold rush out here in California.
Okay.
But it's a design award for architecture. It's been around for quite some time.
You also did a project called the Fairfax Brutalist Multifamily Development, which was a surprise for me. I've never heard of a brutalist multifamily development. Was that the first?
As far as I could tell, the first that we've designed. It was kind of implementing concrete in sort of a simplified form. It's a 4-unit project kind of in mid-city here in Los Angeles.
And how do you use restraint when you're doing brutalism? Because those can be some big sweeping moves.
That's true. With restraint, it comes back to formalism or the form itself and the materiality. So we try to keep a very simple palette of concrete or plaster and glass and try not to distract by implementing too many different colors or too many different materials. If you see on our website, the Fairfax Brutalist, it's a stacked duplex in the front and a stacked duplex in the back. The 2 balconies are wrapped in a simple form that slopes forward and slopes backwards to kind of encapsulate those 2 canopies and balconies. So a very simple form.
Now, you also built this as well as designed it, right?
We typically do, yeah. We're architect-led design build. Clients come to us because they don't just want an amazing design, but they also want it to be built well. So that's kind of helpful if you can do both under one roof. This particular project, we have it permitted, but we haven't started construction yet.
Okay. That's for times when you want your architect and your builder to be the same person so they don't argue with each other.
Our approach is to really harmonize that experience. Our company's called Alloy. Alloy is originally the term for blending different metals to create something stronger. Mm-hmm. And so we approach it as, blending 2 disciplines, architecture and construction, to create something that's a little bit more robust.
Now, you are a mountain climber. You have climbed several significant peaks in Ecuador, in California, in Colorado. So what's the next architectural mountain that you want to scale, Marcus?
Yeah, we recently purchased a 1940s warehouse here in a suburb of Los Angeles, Culver City.
Uh-huh.
And we're currently ready to break ground on a pretty substantial remodel. So that'll be our Alloy headquarters. So I think that's kind of on the table for this year. We're really excited about it. Really wanted to envelop the ethos of our company, which is clean, simple harmony, and have it really feel good for our team.
So what are going to be some of the features of this design build office that people are going to go in and go, wow, when they walk in there?
I think symmetry and balance, some of the basics of architecture. When you walk in, there'll be 2 adjacent, we're calling them pods, which are basically quiet glass offices. And you'll be able to walk above to the top. And there's a loft, 2 loft spaces that are connected with a catwalk that goes across the kitchen. So you're able to look down from above. From that central gallery space, there are 2 planes of white surfaces, which are hidden pivot doors. Each pivot door is 6 feet by 14 feet high. The idea behind a lot of our projects is to create each room or even the building as a whole to be super simple and basic, but yet has kind of unraveling or unfolding spaces. So the design studio is hidden behind 2 large pivot doors, but also the bathrooms and the conference room. It's a way to make the space feel clean, but still very functional. We're really excited and hoping that we'll be able to deliver on our own design work.
So you've got to know someone on the inside to know where to pee.
Exactly. That's the only, yeah, even some of the great mid-century modernist architects, they're always hiding things behind hidden doors, and you can't tell, where did I leave my cereal? Or, you know.
Now, you also is it jiu-jitsu that you teach, Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
I've trained Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a blue belt. Yeah, I've always been involved in the martial arts. I've done Jeet Kune Do, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Filipino stick fighting. Even as a kid, my mother was pregnant with me while she was training in full contact karate. So I was kind of learning before I was even out here. Yeah, so it was kind of like built into my ethos even before I took my first breath.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, just the Asian influence, even before I started getting into architecture, what was always there through the martial arts.
When people come to you as clients, what are some of the rookie mistakes or assumptions that they make coming in that you have to educate them on?
We always ask for their program and what are their goals. But I think probably the most rookie mistake is to have a preconceived notion of what your house should be or what the floor plan should be. And I think a good client will realize that their architect is the professional, and to make sure that they come in with a flexible mindset and a flexible idea. Because very frequently we'll provide a design that was never even thought of from our client's perspective, and from ourselves as well. We approach a project, we don't have a preconceived notion. It's a development. It's through an iterative process that the design comes to be.
I bet people are really amazed when you're able to take their program, as architects do, and show them something they never even considered before.
Absolutely. And then actually even some of our clients are architects. And so that's kind of interesting and also somewhat daunting, being the architect for an architect, but also it's kind of an honor. Some of our clients are academics or they're more focused on commercial architecture. So they come to us to assist them on either their home or other project. So if you can deliver an amazing design, but that can also be built really well, because most clients, when they hire an architect, they're usually looking for, let me work with this architect, get a really amazing design. And then how do I get this built? For us, they really come to us for the built product with the understanding that they're getting the full maximum capability from a licensed architect.
I think that's really smart of the architects to come to you because, if they're working on something, say they're building a hospital or a shopping mall, they don't have time to work on this kind of thing. They need somebody to do it for them and with them.
Exactly. Yeah. And if I was designing a hospital, I'd probably go back to them. So it kind of works both ways, But yeah, it's super helpful. Being out here in LA with the entertainment industry, you have writers, directors, producers, and it's always kind of similar in the construction field.
Mm-hmm.
If you're writing a script and then you hand it over to a producer, the producer has to really understand through reading the ethos of the film. And I think it's sort of the same in our industry, where it's helpful to really have the person or the team who created the thought behind like the genesis of the design to execute it in construction.
Well, as someone who hired a design build firm myself for my house, I can personally attest to the wisdom of that decision for individuals.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. And then speaking along those lines, something that differentiates us is we call it the architect-led design build. There are a lot of different approaches to design build where you have a partnership between a builder and an architect or a contractor who leads the process. But for us, we feel it's very important to have the architect lead on the project because the architect oftentimes can spend 6 months, a year plus with the client, building the relationship, making sure that the program and the design is designed well. But in order to build it and deliver the project, it's super critical, as you found out.
Well, also, architects don't really keep track of what things cost.
Exactly. That's true.
So if you're building it too, you have to keep track of what things cost. You have to keep track of what, roofing materials are and plywood and 2x4s and steel and glass and windows and doors and all of that. So as you're designing this thing, you can be also kind of monitoring, like, where is the budget in relation to what I'm putting together as a house plan?
That's so important. Yeah. And in our process, we don't present a design without a ballpark price. So every time we meet we always are updating that ballpark.
Yeah.
And as we go through the process, we make sure it gets more and more accurate as it gets refined.
Is AI helping with that estimation process?
Yeah, we're starting to experiment a little bit with AI with respect to estimating. But right now, mostly the AI is sort of helping on the marketing side for us.
Mm-hmm. What does it do on the marketing side for you?
We kind of use it as an editor, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether it's social media or text for your website or a speaking engagement, it's sort of a kind of a writing assistant.
Yeah, I call it a friend who's smarter than me.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Architects, not necessarily the best in the English department. So it's very helpful. But going back to the construction pricing,
Mm-hmm.
the traditional method of hire an architect and hire your builder afterwards, it's very tricky, especially in light of the fires that happen here in LA. There's so many people who are in this situation where they're saying, okay, I have my insurance, I need a new house. And so how do I move forward? And if you do hire an architect outside of a builder, you always have to bring in that builder. And oftentimes either the builder is not interested or too busy with other active projects to really give it the time it needs for pricing. So I think that's really where you really need to implement that design build philosophy so you can really dial in pricing.
And that's a good point, too, not just for LA because of the fires, but anywhere where there's lots of demand on builders. It is often difficult, much more difficult to get the thing built than it is to get it designed.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. People, like, for example, in your situation, when you wanted to do that project, you weren't thinking, I want a few beautiful pieces of paper. You know, that wasn't your goal, right?
Right.
You're thinking about how beautiful and calm and amazing your house is going to feel. So it's kind of a means to the end, but it's a very important means in the architectural process.
Marcos, this is great, and what you're doing is really helpful for clients. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thanks so much, George. I appreciate it.
George was speaking with California architect Marcos Santa Anna. John Pizzarelli, son of jazz legend Bucky Pizzarelli, is a guitarist, singer, and musical storyteller. John's career swings across more than 40 recordings and 20 solo albums. Drawing inspiration from rockabilly to bossa nova, he's paid tribute to Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Duke Ellington, and the Beatles. He's also collaborated with Paul McCartney, James Taylor, and Rosemary Clooney. A Broadway performer, Grammy co-producer, and co-host of Radio Deluxe with his wife Jessica Molaski, he's a busy guy.
John, is everybody in your family a musician? I mean, you've got parents, wife, daughter, uncles. Like, did nobody miss the gene?
I was lucky. My son works in a really fine restaurant where he's an assistant general manager. So I've got it covered now. I can make music and then go to really good places to eat. So I've got that all covered.
Well, you need to have one in the family who can get you in the right doors, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you started out, of course, in this musical family playing the guitar. I think I read you played the 6th string until you're about 18, and then you discovered the 7?
You know, the 7th string was always, it has a low A, and it doesn't change any of the forms, but it gives you a broader, it's more like a pianistic kind of approach to the guitar. So you have a lot of low notes that you don't have on a 6-string guitar. And my father played one from about 1966 till the end of his life. And they were in the house. So every once in a while, my father would say, here's how you do this, or showed me it, and then picked it up and started working with him. And we became 2 7-string guitarists together.
And at what point did you decide, like, okay, music is going to be my career. That's it. I'm not going to become an architect or something.
That's the funny part. Was my wife and I joke about when we were very young, they take you in a room, answer a bunch of questions, and then they tell you what you're going to be when you grow up. And so I think when I was 6, they said, oh, you're going to be an architect. And so, I mean, I construct a lot of jazz solos. I think that works out. You know, there's something to all of that. I was about 25 or 26 when I realized I was actually doing this for a living. You know, where I was, I'm going out and I make money and I pay rent and I pay bills and I got a charge card. So this is this might be what I'm doing, you know. The only other job I ever had was as a camp counselor. So that was really fun for me. But it was the music thing that sort of worked itself out because I was in the right place, I think, at the right time to do what I wanted to do.
You've been in a lot of right places at the right time. I read that you used to open for Sinatra towards the end of his career.
In 1993, I did, 6 and 12, 18 concerts. We did 6 in Germany, and it went so well, they asked me to stay on and do 12 in the United States. And those were like the last couple of tours for Sinatra. So it was daunting. There's a lot of things when I look back at it, I could have been much better at it, but, it was just so, it was crazy to be in the same, area code as Sinatra, much less the same building. And so it was a lot different than if I had opened for him in 78. But it was still pretty exciting.
Or 62 at the Sands in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that would have been exciting. And it was fun because Germany lent itself to not needing a comedian.
So no Joey Bishop was around?
No Joey Bishop, no Pat Cooper, no Tom Dreesen. So in Germany, RCA had a German company that ran it called BMG, the Bertelsmann Music Group. And they were quite fond of me at that time. And so the guy over there, Heinz Henn, he recommended me because he knew the promoter. And he said, well, we got a guy who could do it. And it all just worked out. I did 20 minutes or 25 minutes and then ran off stage.
Now, what was older Sinatra like in comparison to the Rat Pack days?
He was just older.
Yeah.
That was the thing. I mean, he didn't have the ring-a-ding-ding about him. And there were good days and bad days. So he just sort of stayed away. I only met him one time before the gig in Berlin, Germany, when he said to me, eat something, you look bad, which was a joke.
That's great.
So, and then I saw him, when did I see him again? Oh, yeah, I met him backstage once. We finished in Chicago, in Aurora, Illinois.
Yeah.
And I would go off to the left and he would come on from the right. And one night I said, well, why not? He's standing right there. Can I just come off where he is and I'll shake his hand? And he was very sweet. He was in the wings when we were playing at the end, listening to our set. And that was sort of crazy. There was like, well, there's Frank Sinatra right there.
Well, let's hear a tune from John. This 1956 tune is from the play Mr. Wonderful, starring Sammy Davis Jr., one of Frank's buddies. Edie Gourmet took it to number 39 on the charts that same year, although the 1958 recordings by Sammy and Frank are the best-known versions, even more so than Peggy Taylor singing it in one of my favorite old TV series, Peter Gunn. Here's John with Too Close for Comfort.
Be wise, be smart, behave, my heart. Don't upset your cart when she's so close. Be soft, be sweet, but be discreet. Don't go off your beat. She's so close for comfort. Too close for comfort, please, not again. Too close to know just when to say when. Be firm, be fair, be sure, beware. On your guard, take care. While there's such temptation, one thing leads to another. Too late to run for cover. She's much too close for comfort, never. wise, be smart, behave, my heart. Don't upset your cart when she's so close. Be soft, be sweet, but be discreet. Don't go off your beat. She's so close for comfort. Too close for comfort, please, not again. Too close to know just when to say when. Be firm, be fair, be sure, beware. On your guard, take care. While there's such temptation, one thing leads to another. Too late to run for cover. She's much too close for comfort now. Isaiah J. Thompson at the piano, ladies and gentlemen.
John, with your current family, and you've got like now 3 generations of musicians, your daughter, Madeline, has been performing for quite some time?
Yeah, she's been writing songs for a little over 10 years. She went to LaGuardia, the School of the Arts in New York City, and there was a really good songwriting group there where she started. And I think it was a Joni Mitchell songbook that Jessica had left in the right place that got into Madeline's hands. So all the guitars got tuned weird, and the subject matter was just brilliant of the songs that she's written, and they get better and better. She's only 28. She's got a lot of good music that's online and also about to be online. So she's a hell of a little guitarist and really smart songwriter. It's amazing.
And you have hosted your own radio show in WNEW, New York Tonight. And there was also Radio Deluxe. Where was that on?
Radio Deluxe is still on. We're actually in our 20th year. It's one of the great well-kept secrets of radio. It's been on all over the place. And we're finally on WBGO in New York, but we're on in about 40 to 60 cities. Toronto on their jazz station, LA, K-Jazz out there, and KBEM in Minneapolis, WAMC in the Catskills, and WICN in the Berkshires, and then all over other places. And it's just been crazy. We just popped it out there, and it's one of those things. It's an overnight success after 20 years.
Believe me, I understand. Let's hear another song, this one by Rodgers and Hart, made famous by Judy Garland in the 1939 film Babes in Arms. It provokes the profound feeling of déjà vu, lovers who sense they've met before, even though they know they haven't. Here's John with Where or When.
It seems we stood and talked like this before. We looked at each other in the same way then, but I can't remember where or when. The clothes you're wearing are the clothes you wore. The smile you're smiling, you were smiling then, but I can't remember where or when. Some things that happen for the first time seem to be happening again. And so it seems that we have met before and laughed before and loved before. Who knows where or when? Some things that happen for the first time seem to be happening again. And so it seems that we have met before and laughed before and loved before, but who knows where or when. Isaiah J. Thompson and Michael Karn.
John, you've got a new album coming out honoring Tony Bennett. What's that all about?
Well, we went in the studio about a year ago, and I was thinking it was a right time to honor Mr. Bennett and put together a bunch of songs, the hits, and some of the obscure things that were singular to Tony, similar to what I've done, in the past with Sinatra and Richard Rodgers.
And the Beatles.
And the Beatles, that's right. Thank you. It's part of the series, so it'll be called Dear Mr. Bennett. It'll be out in March. We'll be all over the United States touring that, and Canada too. We did the Montreal Jazz Festival in July. And it's amazing how Sinatra, Nat Cole, and Tony Bennett all had their own repertoires.
Yes.
And how they came to be.
Very different. Yes.
Yes. And it's so interesting, songs that were written for Bennett or that got to Bennett before they got to Sinatra. And same thing with Nat Cole, things that were written for him that nobody else ever really did. So it's a fun challenge all the time to find songs that both the hits and the interesting things. It's what I do. So it's fun to do it.
Now, do you know the Tony Bennett song Moments Like This?
Yes, I heard the record of it from the Art of Excellence in Jonathan Schwartz's apartment before it was released. I'll never forget it. It was one of the most gorgeous things I ever heard.
Unbelievable. Really, really great song. I think 86, something like that, it came out.
Yeah, it was a game changer, that whole album. And that was that's the back half, the beginning of the second act, really, after the Bill Evans and the George Barnes and Ruby Braff records, and then the One Orchestra record. Life is Beautiful. This is the return to Columbia, and it's one of my favorite records of all time, Art of Excellence, too. It's just got some singular Benedetto things on there.
John, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a real pleasure.
Well, it's so nice of you to have me on the show, and I hope we can do it again when the next record comes out.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by the Brent R. Harris Charitable Trust, restorer of Richard Neutra's Kaufman Desert House in Palm Springs and 6 other houses in California. By the E. Jones Conservancy, preserving the legacy of modernist architecture in Northwest Arkansas, efjonesconservancy.org. And by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Got a guest to suggest for our show? Write her at bobby@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another no naming rights included edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.